So I'm going to watch this movie here that I've never heard of before, but uh, uh, I I tend to watch random stuff. So what's weird though is that it's about a sport. That's another genre of which I watch very little. Just like noir, just really in I don't think I've watched 50 of both genres. So it's still though I assume it will be about personalities and not the sport itself. So uh, I don't beyond that watch anything else. I mean, most of sports with real personalities, most non-movie sports is boring in my opinion, where there's no story, there's no, well, there might be personalities, but it's more speculation as to whatever they do. It's not a movie. It doesn't have anything coherent in it beyond some numbers, so I really do not understand why it's popular. At any rate, I think that can still work as a story, I suppose. I mean, if it does have a story, depending on what. I mean, I've once watched some movies based on some football manager, which I suppose, is interesting in some sense, in the sense that, well, in this case, how to manage and it's, with regards to business as well, there are elements. Uh, Other than that, I mean, this one is I'm going to watch now, called Tommy's Honor, which I've never heard of before. Uh, it's about some pioneers, apparently, of golf, which is, well, quite a simple sport, I suppose, in comparison, and not quite a team sport at all, I assume. Yeah. So it's different from the most major, most popular sports, I suppose. And I don't think I've ever watched any other movie about golf people specifically. I've only tried the actual. I won't say I tried the sport. I just tried to, use the stick and to hit the ball, which is actually more difficult than one thinks it may be. I've tried that um, for a few hours at most, I suppose. Not all at once, but really, I haven't tried it for very long. So I know it very little. I mean, I don't really know any of its official rules or such. Or if I ever did, I really forgot anything really. And apparently these might have been the personalities in this movie might have been the codifiers of such rules. So I don't know if it will effectively act against my understanding of the film, but I don't think it's such a complex sport. I thought that of baseball once as well, and I can't believe the amount of terminology. It's like just continuously new terminology. That is, I can't believe how a seemingly simple sport can be made so complex. So many concepts, so many specific things. I don't know. Golf might be somewhat similar. I mean, the fact that doesn't seem to be a team sport, I guess, might make it more simplistic, I suppose. But anyway, I'll just try this and see what it's like. Oh, and I um, I know so little of this film. I couldn't even uh, get the right name at all. It's not Tommy's, it's Timmy's apparently. Anyway, it's not very relevant. It's just that those two names are really similar. So and I don't know why those separate names are practically the same. I mean, it's just about from one letter. Just add, yeah. Anyway, it has some nice cinematography. I guess if you want to show credits, showing them above from a helicopter sort of point of view. Yeah, showing uh, some sort of stones and the sea is, I guess, one of the better ways to show them, I mean, as opposed to in old films they used to just have a black background, and it's really the worst. Not all films had such backgrounds in credits, but some did, and it's I very much prefer it when they try to be creative. There are some films that have creative titles, as in uh, artistically creative. This is more naturalistic. So so far, I just uh, it seems, yeah, somewhat damp, but it's also strange. I don't know. There's a lot of people with sideburns, and that makes me wonder if it's the Victorian period, because it doesn't say otherwise explicitly. It is. I cannot quite tell. I mean, it's about the childhood of someone who at the beginning is pretty old, but either way, there's no focal point, so I still cannot tell. I mean, time is the present era at the beginning. The sideburns don't make me wonder whether it's the Victorian. I think they were much more present there. I think, I'm not sure. I don't think you see many people with sideburns today. Specifically sideburns. I mean, more people with beards than sideburns. Anyway, yeah, there's someone who looks like Father Christmas. It's quite kind of funny. Anyway, not quite, because otherwise, I don't know why he's wearing red and has this whole beard. But otherwise, yeah, it looks kind of like that guy. Either way, oh, and here's the first piece of terminology I've never heard of before. Mushy. And looking at images of it, I have no idea how it's different from any normal sort of supposed to be a dated term, but seems like any usual golf club, as usual. So when one doesn't have a deep understanding of a sport, I suppose it's always weird how this terminology just creeps up at you. And yeah, 17 minutes in, and that is the first time it says when it's set. 1800s, 1860 something, and yeah, I don't know if films would be better to say beforehand, even before the film begins. It always some do, and then you have your whole perceptions about that period and not any other. Because it might have been the 1700s, but then they'd be, well, I'm not that familiar with Scotland throughout the ages anyway, so I wouldn't know. I mean, what the difference would be between the two centuries there specifically. I mean, if it was France, obviously it would be slightly different, but even then, it's wherever it's set. I mean, France was very different in the 1700s as well, if you consider very different classes and such, obviously, until the revolution. But anyway, yeah, well, one seeming deficiency in many sports films seems to be this assumption that somehow some people succeed straight away, and this movie just shows it with a lot of fanfare, this music and such, and you know, it just leaves you wondering where, how. I mean, was it just luck, or it doesn't otherwise give an explanation of anything, any special abilities or such. The only hint is that the possibility that it might be due some other type of golf club. But really, it doesn't make much sense either way. Obviously, you cannot explain how a person might calculate the swing to cover the distance and such. It doesn't. I mean, the people themselves probably do not know exactly how it happens. Uh, in, in 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 terms of which playing parts are used and such. But obviously, I suppose if I'm going to go into that, I suppose if it did, it would be unique. But I've never seen any such thing so far. It still doesn't explain much. So just but it shows the person training at all. It's like there we go. Suddenly there's a whole group of people, an audience, and what do you know? There's success, and then there's success multiple years. It's very rushed. It's very curious how golf can even descend to violence somehow. I've never seen it before. I guess most sports can elicit such emotions, but golf somehow seems too simplistic for that, I suppose, ultimately. Just the way they talked about it, as if somehow each one had their patch or something, makes little sense, but I guess that can be the mentality. It's interesting how the golf ball at one point was used to notify someone inside a house on the upper floors that they're there. I guess one might not ever think of it before normally. But it might work, I suppose. I mean, yeah, I guess that kind of ball is. I think it's plastic, isn't it? And it's not hard enough, like a stone that might crack the window. But I suppose it depends on how hard one throws it. Really, so I suppose the stone can also be thrown, possibly not very hard. Still makes a bit of noise, but not crack a window, I suppose. But it might be harder. Stones are normally as round then, so the angles might be more destructive, I suppose. But otherwise, I suppose, yeah, a rounded plastic might be more useful, more capable of doing that, yeah. I suppose in this movie's context, it's also a metaphor of how the relationship was achieved using the fame he got from golf, I suppose. No idea if it's a real love at first sight thing or an infatuation or yeah. Anyway, I might be overthinking this. I liked the shot that they made of the statues when he goes to see Sam Neill's character. Yeah, incidentally, out of Jurassic Park, I guess he just manages golf tournaments as a side hobby or something, beyond dinosaurs. Yeah, I like that. I like the shot at any rate because it sort of indicated, and contrasted with what you wanted to talk to him about with regards to the shares and such. I like how he rebels in the face of obviousness. How none of this social structure makes any sense in terms of the obvious facts. I mean, these managers, these members, they they aren't even ever seen playing the sport, and yet they think they can pocket the majority of the share, presumably. That makes no sense. So yeah, they they had to give in. And it makes little sense that they mention changing times and such, and somehow they cannot realize that it's got nothing to do with time, that somehow facts do not change, and if something happens due to some other person, well, the other person can be their own agent, really. And another piece of terminology that I've never heard of that is curiously logical, and yet to halve a hole, yeah, it simply means a tie, but it's never used in any other sport when there are ties. So I suppose it's a bit strange. I mean, it sort of makes more sense when you have a hole, I guess, to halve it, but it's not essentially halved, of course. I mean, I suppose you just cannot have. You cannot even have two balls in the one hole, I assume, unless the hole is bigger than usual. I'm assuming one ball is all it maybe ever takes, but yeah, it's sort of a strange logic to come to, and it's presumably just in golf. As usual, just like in baseball, they always find some neologisms to cover concepts that make sense otherwise, that could even use words already in existence, but somehow they invent new ones specifically for that sport. I mean, baseball has a lot of terminology, and none of them. I mean, players can have ties as well, and ties and called halving and such, and then it seems like this halving is only used in so-called match play, which contrasts with a medal tally of some sort, which from it seems like it's about relatively small. Well, anyway, this movies aren't really about getting really deep and technical about such issues, I suppose. So I just read for a few minutes, but that's pretty much it, unless somehow it's something longer lasting than a single movie. Also, I wonder, I noticed have a glove at one point. I've not seen such a glove before. It's like it wasn't there at the sides. I'm not sure if it has any specialized functions in golf. That is how little I know of the sport. But I can't think of anything functional. I mean, maybe the touching of the club, I guess. Yeah, I suppose. But is it touched by the side? Is it held by the side? What this movie also shows clearly, and that I assume the actual sport does as well, with its many tournaments and inevitable celebrities, is that a lot of fuss is made out of nothing, practically. I mean, I suppose the most similar sport would be a pool table or billiard or snooker, but even that is much more complex. So in a way, it's sort of interesting that people care about whether this ball hits that ball, which makes the other ball bounce, whether people can calculate which direction the ball they hit goes to, so it goes in the pocket. But golf is much more simplistic, way more simplistic. And not only that, it seems to rely inherently, unless the turf is managed perfectly, and I'm assuming in the Victorian era they didn't even have artificial turf, so I assume they just played outside. It seems to rely on this certain variability, just unreliable topology. And so I wonder just what the fuss is about. I mean, it's basically chaos in action. At least there was a lot of that, it seems, in any sort of calculation. I mean, can someone really have just? I mean, this may be more manageable if the turf, but even then, it must be difficult to really smooth it out everything, unless you're playing it on just a really straight surface with marble or something. It must be really difficult for it to always go in the same direction. I'd be curious, I guess, to see whether, like if a machine hit 1,000 balls on grass outside or even artificial turf, and how many of them go in the same direction. Whether it's the majority of times, or if it's only a small percentage of times when it deviates, or surprisingly if it's even 100%. I mean, it cannot be 100% on natural grass, surely, unless by some weird happenstance it just happens to be completely straight. But nature isn't normally that straight, so it's a weird spot. I mean, yeah, a pool table as such is virtually artificial, but it doesn't even attempt to introduce the element of grass, as far as I know. It sort of looks like grass, but it is pretty straight. Otherwise, there might be really small bumps, I suppose, but it's mostly predictable, I suppose. I mean, the little I played, little but still more than golf, I suppose. I really didn't detect any differences. Of course, I didn't. By far, I didn't play golf enough to know whether balls go in the same direction every time, or even try to observe how they move, and if, at any rate, I'm assuming a pool table would be much more predictable than a golf ball, but I suppose I could look up studies if I'm interested enough. So, yeah, I finished it, and as a biography, as usual, like most other biographies, it has its ups and downs, and it's irregular in parts and not predictable. I mean, most have something like that. They just depict whatever happens, really, unless they fictionalize it and somehow make it even more irregular. And it was somewhat strong at the end, perhaps, but also sort of illogical. Sort of like his father says at one point. I think the music was appropriate. Yeah, it was appropriate, except, you know, at one point they show this tree, and there was there's a sort of a moment where the protagonist just cuts it down due to. But the point is that it was the first time it was shown at all, really shown, and so it didn't have that much of an emotional resonance, considering that it was implied that the character had a history with the tree, but it wasn't shown in the film. So, despite the music and the intensity of the moment, it wasn't quite as resonant, simply because it didn't have sort of that beginning that the ending was supposed to close a chapter on. So, but either way, it made sense, and either way, it's a biography. So as I said, it's just, like many other biographies, it's just biographies simply tell. And then it depends on what the biography is about. So this is, just yeah. If I was intensely interested in golf, then yeah, it's probably a sort of aesthetic film. Surroundings are interesting, and the music is appropriate. But I'm not quite. So, on the other hand, biography of Frida Kahlo, for example, that I once watched, was sort of more resonant simply because it featured art generally, and art is more of a accessible topic than golf, which is a specific sport. Although that it was Kahlo's art, so it was quite dark, but it was interesting to see what her life was like, which was also dark. And yeah, this was another life. This played on film. So it was simply a way to get for instead of simply reading a biography of this Thomas Morris character, people get to know him through film, and it works, I suppose. Meaning, I usually always go ahead to read more about characters in the film in general, but I do like to watch films first if possible. It makes more sense, it can have more meaning, usually. And that's how I initially knew about Frida as well, and then I went on to read more about her and generally look at her art and such, and her husband and such as well, which who was famous in his own way. And, but yeah, generally, well, sport movies are sport movies. Yeah, it wasn't quite. I mean, it was also a historic movie, so it was practically a period drama. So on that front, it was interesting. In that sense, interesting to see all the differing costumes that normally movies do not have, simply because this was set in a different era. So it's a mixed bag, as usual. Obviously, in the end, it depends on whether the watcher has any history with the sport or the character, or whether they like period dramas. So it's just a medley of the all these genres put together, really. So could be interesting, could not. Either way, it was just a life, I suppose, like all lives. Yeah. So that's that for now, I guess.